All right, welcome everybody to the next episode of the LearnIt Podcast, where we interview and speak with education leaders around Canada and learn from their inspiring stories. So today with me, I have a very, very good mentor of mine and an individual that has helped me a lot in education, has helped me understand a lot more about this industry. But Aly, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me here.
Spending some time with us. I wouldn't do justice if I gave the introduction. So I'll let you quickly introduce yourself, share a little bit about why you got into education, how you fell into this whole world of teaching.
Of course. I got into the role of education more or less by circumstance. I was in university, actually in engineering, first semester, didn't work out, and I transferred into computer science, and I enjoyed it. But at that time, around the early 2000s, I had no idea what computer science would lead into. All I thought was I'd sit in front of a computer and just program.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to do something that I actually enjoy. So I actually ended up doing a business course in high school that I remembered when I was in university. And I said, let me switch into business. During that same time, I was actually volunteering on Saturday Sunday school within my community. And I actually felt it strike a chord with me, where I'm like, I enjoyed giving back. I enjoyed working with kids, working with students. And then from there, doing my business degree, plus volunteering on the side and doing education and teaching, I graduated with a 3.3 average, went into OISE, Teachers College, University of Toronto, and then from there graduated and landed a job at the TDSB. Yeah. So that's where it all began.
And I think that's what we often see. I think with a lot of teachers that I've at least interacted with, it seems to be that they stumble upon this passion of, I actually like to teach. It's not something people instinctively think of immediately when they're in undergrad or they're pursuing a degree. They fall across this journey of, I actually really like to teach. Let me go and pursue that more and more and more. And so the education industry, teaching in itself has changed a lot in the last couple of years, especially in the last 2 years with AI, with other technologies coming in. There's so many considerations that teachers have to keep in mind, new considerations. There's so many different changes in the way students are learning. Just wanted to get your perspective on a higher level. What do you think, where do you think we're headed with the industry? And do you think it's a positive direction, or do you think there's room for us to mold that a bit more?
So in the past direction, especially if you look back at 2007, 2008, there was the financial crisis. So there was a push for financial literacy. And then, of course, as the years progressed from the financial literacy component, and then it went into making sure you include mindfulness.
Yeah.
So mental health, equity, fairness, but also balancing it off with the level of achievement. So from there, we've now gone into sort of a situation where and then the pandemic, we went into virtual learning, which was a big pivot for a lot of teachers, how to adjust and deal with digital content, digital material, digital production of item and end product for students to showcase their level of understanding of their learning. Mm-hmm. And then that's where we are at now, we've gone through the pandemic, we've done digital and virtual learning, digital virtual content, and now here comes AI.
Right.
So with AI, now the circumstance for teachers to not only pivot, but also to learn on the go is how to address, how to approach, how to navigate and manage the instances of AI. Instances of AI, how do you educate students to use it in an effective manner, responsibly? And how do you engage students to be mindful of, that's called plagiarism. Mm-hmm. So in regards to utilizing AI's developed content and calling it their own.
Yeah.
Versus use the AI in a nice, engaging manner to gather the information, and then from that information, using bits of it for your own versus chunks of it, or even utilizing and making sure that the AI, whatever content that is generated, is actually factual.
Right.
Because that's the other side that students are now realizing that, the information that I gathered and put together, either as my own or as bits and pieces, is not actually factual.
Yeah.
And we've seen examples of that in, I think, a recent court case in BC in law, and on an ongoing basis it happens with education, where students pull information because they're tight on time, scrambling, maybe they might be working part-time jobs, they're just managing a lot, and they realize, I need to find a quick, easy way to get something done. And that's also changed in regards to the form of assessment in the education industry. Is a lot of people are like, a lot of teachers are like, I can either mark a lot, or I can have another form that will still allow me to assess if the level of the student's learning.
Right.
So there's different ways.
Yeah.
But then the other issue that we then face as educators at the high school level is that how do we prepare students for post-secondary? Whereas if we start to remove various tests and quizzes, assessments, because of the pandemic, because it's difficult to deliver those in a digital format effectively, now we realize, oh, wow, how do I go back to that? But also, how do I prepare the students that are now realizing, well, if that course has an exam or it has a test, I don't want to take that course.
I see.
But then that course will help prepare them for post-secondary.
Right.
So this is where we're kind of stuck as teachers, but also students, and we're trying to get them prepared for the next step, which is then another struggle to make sure that they're used to that assessment format.
Yeah.
So here we are battling AI, also different forms of assessment, different ways to engage the students. So you can see it's never a one-done battle. It's always an ongoing battle. Just the things change, the things pivot.
No, 100%. I think it's more had a lasting impact on the student perspective because there's so many things that can be done. The art of the possible is just, it's so exponential that for any course that you pick, there's a tool that can do something for it. And just shifting focus to the teacher perspective, have you personally explored tools to help make, there's things that are challenging in what you do, whether it's grading, whether it's lesson plans, whatever that may be. But do you feel like there's going to be a higher adoption from teachers as well of these tools? Or do you think it's more managing how the students use the tool?
It's both. There needs to be workshops in PD for the teachers to understand how to approach, how to deal with, how to navigate it. And then, of course, you as a teacher, once you're educated or knowledgeable, then you also have to explain to the students how to manage it all. So, example, in my situation, when I come across instances of AI, I show my students, this is what the tool I have. This is what shows it to me. But at the same time, I tell students that if you decide to go through extra steps to avoid the detection of AI, then I will not accept the work because I can't quantify, I can't clarify if it's authentic or not. But then the other side of the thing is you have to also have students understand there's two parameters. If I, as a teacher, do what I need to do to prepare you now, you'll be prepared. You'll be better prepared when it comes to post-secondary, whichever pathway you take. Because at the same time, if you go into university or college, you're going to have to go through the checkers, and you're paying for your education. If you go into the workplace and you say, "Oh, that is my work," but technically it's not, and then someone else has to take your information, which is not factual or has a whole bunch of inaccuracies, and then they have to present that to a panel based upon your assumed truth that this is accurate. And then when that person presents and they realize, oh, that isn't, you'll be very quick shown the door. So the students have to realize there's implications. They're based on the decisions that they make and how to better prepare them with those decisions. So what I try to do, make sure they understand their decisions, the impacts, the results, and hopefully they can be responsible after they move on to their next steps after high school.
Yeah, and I think to some extent, there has to be some belief in the students to say, okay, I trust that you'll respect it and you will use it responsibly. Yes. And if it helps you learn better, if it helps you get you different practice questions, just more practice, those are all, productive ways of using the tool. And then you mix that belief with, trust and education, and then hopefully we get a world where these two things can coexist together.
Exactly. Well, they already coexist. It's just a matter of balancing it all, especially with all the other demands related to teaching and related to being a student.
Yeah, no, for sure. And from your story, your perspective, were there any moments that, whether it was in your teaching career, in the classroom, or whether it was in your undergrad, any moments that really changed the way that you think about teaching students? Are there things that you do as a teacher that you feel, this is something that only I do, or this is something that I feel like a lot more teachers should start to do?
Well, some of the things I do is I bring in guest speakers. I bring in workshops. With those workshops and the guest speakers, I can easily deliver and teach those context, that material. But the only issue is that because it's coming from me versus someone who's an expert, someone who's more qualified, the students probably greatly appreciate that a lot more. Because they can hear Mr. Hirji speak every single day, and after a certain time, they might just need a break and draw it out. Yeah. Hearing from someone else speak, it changes up the pace, it changes up the day, it changes up their environment. And then what the students, you notice the interaction, the attention.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's some of the things I usually do. Bring in the guest speakers, I find activities that I can do A great example is because I do a lot of teamwork-based activities. I did the regular norm activity, which is building a tower out of straw. Straws and spaghetti with tape and marshmallows. And the students picked off on that because whoa, it's not going to be my regular lecturing course. I'm going to have a few activities so that the students actually apply what they're learning. Another example is when I do an activity on teamwork. I give the students a simulation based on they're lost at sea. They have 15 items. They have to rank these 15 items from 1 to 15, and then they will need to collaborate with their peers and see if they choose the right items that will help them survive. Another example is my other classes is that they have to do group presentations. So they realize the importance of teamwork and also looking over each person's work. The aspect of trust, the aspect of collegiality and collaboration. These are the necessary life skills that our students will need. But why do I bring this all in is because these life skills they'll be able to carry on throughout the rest of their life after high school. So that way, yes, I'll teach them content, but I bring in these other life skills, these 21st century skills, these activities, so that they realize, oh, I picked that up in high school, and I know how to utilize that skill easily and when I go to post-secondary or even in the workplace. So it almost becomes very natural for them.
And I think that's something that needs to get increasingly important, primarily because these skills that you're talking about are also becoming more important in the workplace. So the earlier that students can start to learn these skills, the more beneficial it will be for them because they'll go post-secondary and they'll say, I already know this. Let me start picking up where I left off.
Let me move on to the next level.
Exactly. That's really good. And I love the idea of the activity-based learning, which I know is, getting hands-on with something. I spoke to a professor at York before, and he was saying, we were doing a group project, and so I randomly did a spinny wheel to make the groups. And the students were not happy with it because they wanted to pick their team members. And he said, look, in real life, when you work on projects, when you work in companies, you don't get to pick the people that you work with. So the more, in those small ways, if we can simulate that environment and simulate that experience, I think that prepares students more for what's to come as well.
Of course.
And if you were to think about, are there certain things about the industry that if you had a magic wand and you said, okay, this is one thing or two things I would change, are there any things that you'd help push in a positive direction or a different direction?
So in the industry itself, more tools to support the
tools.
teachers, more tools, more resources would be helpful. More time for training.
Okay.
It's just at the end of the day, there's time, but then the availability of funds to go for this specific types of training does not exist or it's very limited. So if I wanted to go to a conference, there's funds. I have to go looking for where the funds can be available, or I have to sacrifice something that I would have wanted this year for something else. If it's PD, it would be nice if there's PD related to AI or new technology, utilizing new technologies, or if it's a PD on just how do I build a classroom atmosphere, an environment, so that way the students feel happy and engaged to come into a classroom. They feel welcome. It's not they're going to be treated like I'm a person that just needs a mark. No, I'm a person that's a human being that has feelings. Exactly. So those are the things that moving forward are things that are needed to continue to enhance the classroom environment.
Okay, no, that's good. I think it's the idea that even as teachers, as educators, we have to continuously learn. We have to learn about ways that we can make our classroom better, tools that we can use, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of teachers want what's best for their students. And so if we can do, put in our effort to learn, then it will overall make a better environment.
Of course.
And when you think about, I'm going to ask a bit of a fun question, but if you were to think about your ideal student, sort of a character of an ideal student, what are some of the things that they would have that would you feel set them up for success moving forward to post-secondary?
That's a tough question. It's not an easy question. It's a tough one. What's an ideal student? As long as the student's ready to learn, engage, listen, participate, courteous, respectful, but that's kind of all students. That's for me. It's just now that when the students come into the classroom, the ideal student is literally all of them. It's just a matter of how I nurture and allow them to grow and develop as individuals. So that's where me as I use my assortment of tools that I have available to help build them become the not ideal student for me, but the ideal student for themselves. So that they realize their potential and are able to use that potential for whatever happens afterwards.
Right. Okay. And so even if we think about this notion of having students and preparing them, are there certain things that, if a student feels like they're not able to participate? Because I remember when I was in high school, it's not as easy for everybody. Are there certain things that educators can do to make the environment more comfortable, to make it more easier for, are there different ways in which you make it easier for people to engage and participate?
I'd say some of the easiest way is just to be standing by your door, welcoming the students when they come into your classroom. That's a very simple ask. Greeting them by their name, knowing their names. Yes, you have 30 students in each class. Make sure you know their names. Make sure you know who they are, a little bit about them. Right. Those are little things that will stand out. Having simple conversation with them, being a person, being a human being. Those are the little things that matter as part of engaging and creating that environment for the students.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like the small subtle things are what create the complete class environment, especially, as a student from someone who's coming to say, oh, they know my name, or like they call them, or like they're by the door. Like those small things, they really add up to make the student feel special about being in the classroom. And you've been in the education space a long time now, a couple of years. Hopefully,
plus or minus.
Yeah, hopefully, you get to, and I think you're also working on shaping a lot of different things within the curriculum and the business. Can you share a little bit about what kind of direction you feel like we're taking there from a more business perspective in your experience and your leadership that you're taking there?
So with perspective moving things forward, I would say that use of activities and field trips help. The need for partnerships with industry.
Okay.
So for me, bringing students to visit work sites, connect with mentors, who connect with people in industry is what helps students to realize, oh, yes, they can see themselves in the future. Where they are in grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, they can see themselves in that environment, in that workplace, in that space. Having someone mentor them. I may have not had a mentor, but I hope to have the students have or find a mentor when they finish out of my classroom. If it's a mentor through clubs, sports, nonprofits, business organizations, whatever organizations, they can, at least someone who can help guide them, someone they can lean on for questions that they may have as they go through their life journey. Right. Those are things that would be needed moving forward. The other thing is just making sure that there's resources, monetary and non-monetary, just to provide those necessary activities and tools so students can really enjoy and participate and be not just engaged, but fully engaged in the classroom. Yeah. And those things would be the things to make it a better space for the students moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, that's really fair. And I want to spend also some time talking about experimenting. This idea of, when I teach, I always try and think of, it becomes so easy to repeat, to do the same thing over and over and over again. But I do realize that from the perspective of, my personal development as an educator, it's important to experiment different learning techniques, different activities to see what sticks. I'm curious to know, in your experience as a teacher and also working with other teachers, do you think that there's an increasing importance to experiment? Do you think that that's something we should more consistently do? Do you think it's so easy to get into this trap of rinse and repeat? What is your perspective on experimenting in the classroom?
I'd say experimenting is always good. It allows you to grow as a teacher. So example, if you have an assignment or activity, you try it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you learn from it. The number of times I've tweaked my team building activity, I realized, yes, 30 minutes is too much. I make it down to 20 minutes to build a tower out of straw and tape or spaghetti and marshmallows. I give them 20 minutes. And then, of course, if I do a second round of that activity, I reduce it down to 15. Right. Because then what happens is the students realize, oh, I'm under pressure now. Yeah. I have less time to get something done. And that means I have to collaborate and work with people that I may or may not know, and just to get a certain outcome. And that's from experimenting. Because when I first did it, 30 minutes, I realized too much time. Did it a second time, 20 minutes. But there was the challenge the second time around. Reduced that down to 15, changed the groups again. Right. After I changed the groups, they realized, the first group, they're with their friends, second group, randomized generator. They work with different people. And then working with different people, that forces them out of their comfort zone.
Right. Yeah.
So those are little things as part of experimenting. Even if it's an assignment where they have to do a presentation. Modify the presentation, do a little tweaks. Yeah. What is easy to research, what isn't. If the student's like, sir, I can't find this, too difficult, make it a small change. If it is it's very easy and the students get it done, then you realize, I might have to have variations of this assignment based on year to year, based on the group of students that you get.
Yeah.
But that's from the experimenting of how to change things up and realize, oh, maybe I need to do a tweak here and there to better enhance and benefit the students.
Yeah, especially when you're teaching, it's so hands-on that you could really only see the result after you execute something. You're like, did it work? Did it not work? Things I can change. And then I notice a lot of good teachers, they adapt in flight. So it's not that you wait till the next time, you adapt in flight as you move along to your next session.
Yeah, that's something that you always have to do. You should be doing.
Yeah. And more from, thinking about from a macroeconomic perspective, we've been seeing that, there has been a bit of a shortage in teachers coming in. There's been, maybe people who don't want to, go into teaching as much as they used to before. I'm curious to know what your perspective is on that. Do you think there's certain drivers behind that shortage? Do you think there's certain things that we could do to narrow that gap down a little bit?
Some of the drivers related to shortage is the environment that teachers work in. It's not as what it used to be. It's a lot more demanding, engaging. There's a lot of parameters that do exist. Impacts of student learning, student home environments, lack of resources, building environments. There's a lot of things that are in play. On top of that, post-pandemic, students learning how much they know and how much they don't know, and how much do I have to spend extra to reteach something that may have not been taught. So there's a lot of gaps then. And then on top of that, in regards to is the pay. As for the last many years, teachers have been left at 1%. It's just until recently with the quashed order Bill 124, we're through our arbitration. Hopefully teachers will get a fair salary, fair wage increase.
Yeah.
So those are little things that come into play. And then at the same time, on top of all that, the impact of the teachers program becoming stretched into 2 years instead of 1 year. So now what used to be a glut is now a shortage, because now the teachers that would be coming to the system and spending 1 year doing the teachers program, now they're doing 2 years, which means it takes now double the amount of time to get those group of teachers that are. And then the other thing is, a lot of people might make more money in industry versus wanting to come into teaching. And then, of course, depending on the industry that they worked at, they may or may not get comparable, especially where if they cannot get their years of service in industry recognized to bump them up in the pay scale. So you might have to start at the bottom, which means that's a big cut if you have a family, if you have kids, lifestyle, expenses, the list goes on.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that are impacting teacher shortages.
Yeah.
But also not only just the pay, but not only the programming in regards to teachers college, but also in regards to just the environment.
Yeah. And I think that the challenge is that I would like to think that a lot of people who maybe haven't had the experience teaching or aren't in the industries, it's challenging for individuals to understand how much effort and energy it takes to be in a classroom, to have the energy day in, day out, create the plans, and then go home or spend the evening grading, doing all the paperwork. And it seems like a job, I think, on paper, if someone looks at it, they're like, oh yeah, you just go and teach people and you go home. But there's so much more behind that. There's so much more energy and effort that goes into that's hard to see from the outside. But when you experience it, you're like, that's tiring.
That's where, if they were to be innovative or something to experiment, is where someone who's, let me just do a day in the life, what a teacher looks like.
Yeah.
And that would be something where someone comes in, they say, I have an interest, but I just want to see what it is. Let them see what it is, what a day-to-day being a math or business or science, whatever teacher looks like. And if that sparks an interest in that person, then, and if the teacher program was a 1 year program, then all of a sudden someone just taking a day, let me just try to see what this looks like. And if they have a spark, and if the pay is similar, then all of a sudden you have someone like, oh, I realize I might want to do this. Let me spend a year.
And a year is not too bad of a time investment either,
versus
right?
2 years. Because then there's the impacts of the trade-off related to family or culture, or not culture, but lifestyle or a balance of what they're used to doing and to try something different.
Yeah, well, hopefully the day in the life doesn't cause an increased shortage because people will see how much time and energy it takes. Hopefully that's not the cause that we get to. But it's definitely something that I think is top of mind for a lot of people because it's going to have an impact, not today, not tomorrow, but for the next 5-10 years. It's a domino effect. So it's like, how can we figure out paths to improve that every day that we get closer towards, teachers are starting to retire. Teachers have to think about retirement, right? So we need new teachers to come and make this an attractive industry again, make it an industry that's exciting for a lot of younger folks as well. For sure. And I wanted to ask you if there's one or two messages that you could send to teachers or educators. Maybe it's key lessons that you learned. Maybe it's things that you abide by, your values, anything of that. So what would you share to teachers and educators?
So for teachers and educators, what I'd probably say is don't give up on a child. Don't give up on a student. Regardless of how many missteps or mistakes or whatever, they're always kids. They're always learning. At the same time, don't feel that you can't try new things. Always take a chance. You never know. And at the same time, work within the parameters that you're given. Try to be innovative with the resources that you're given. And then hopefully, whatever results you get, it's a learning experience. At the end of the day, you're learning, and so are students. And then the students will be very receptive to your learning because it shows that you're willing to try something new and hoping that they get something out of it. And if they don't get something out of it, and you don't get something out of it with an activity or experiment, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because as part of experiments, as part of activities, you learn what works and what doesn't work. And the students will be appreciative of that because they're also knowing that you tried something for the benefit of them. So the respect that you hopefully get from them is a lot more versus just being same old style that you might want to do, but change it up sometimes.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things I'd recommend to suggest to teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Aly, for being here with us today. It was absolutely, I had a fun time.
You're welcome.
Spending some time learning about your journey, experiences, the way that you think about education, the way that you think about teaching as well. It's very inspiring. And I hope that more and more individuals start to recognize, how, this job is very selfless. It's a job that means that you're building the future of our globe, of our countries, right? And so I think we need to start recognizing that more and more. So thank you so much for spending some time with us.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.